Throughout the centuries, countless rulers have worn the crown, but only a select few possessed the vision, courage, and determination to reshape the course of human civilization. These weren't just kings. They were architects of empires, revolutionaries of thought, and catalysts of change whose decisions echo through the millennia. From the sun-scorched deserts of ancient Egypt to the grand palaces of Europe, from the steppes of Asia to the battlefields that decided the fate of nations, these 10 monarchs didn't just rule their kingdoms, they transformed the world.
Welcome, Warpath Histories. I am Salman Nasir.
Today, we're counting down the top 10 kings who didn't just make history, they rewrote it entirely. Number 10, Hammurabi of Babylon, 1792 to 1750 BC. Our journey begins nearly 4,000 years ago, in the cradle of civilization itself, Mesopotamia. Here, a young king named Hammurabi ascended to the throne of Babylon, then just one city-state among many competing powers in the region. But Hammurabi had a vision that extended far beyond simple conquest. Yes, he was a formidable military strategist who unified Mesopotamia under Babylonian rule, defeating rival kingdoms through both diplomatic cunning and military might. But his true legacy lies not in the territories he conquered, but in the code he created. The Code of Hammurabi, 282 laws carved into a black stone stele, represents humanity's first comprehensive written legal system. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This principle of proportional justice originated here. These weren't just arbitrary rules handed down by divine mandate. They were rational, organized laws covering everything from property rights and trade regulations to family relationships and criminal penalties. For the first time in human history, justice wasn't simply whatever the powerful decided it should be. The law applied to everyone. Even the king himself was bound by it. This revolutionary concept, that society should be governed by written law rather than the whims of rulers, became the foundation for every legal system that followed. Hammurabi transformed kingship itself. He wasn't just a warrior or a priest king. He was a lawgiver. And in doing so, he created the template for civilized governance that we still follow today. Number 9, Cyrus the Great of Persia, 559 to 530 BC. Fast forward 2 centuries to the highlands of Persia, where a prince named Cyrus would forge the largest empire the world had ever seen, and do it in a way that shocked the ancient world. Cyrus the Great built an empire stretching from the Mediterranean to India, from Egypt to Central Asia. But here's what made him truly revolutionary. He conquered with unprecedented mercy and tolerance. In an age when conquering armies typically massacred populations and burned cities to the ground, Cyrus did something radically different. When he conquered Babylon in 539 BC, he entered the city peacefully, freed the enslaved peoples, and issued what many historians call the world's first declaration of human rights, the Cyrus Cylinder. This clay cylinder proclaimed revolutionary principles: freedom of religion, the right of people to choose their own destiny, and respect for different cultures and traditions. Cyrus freed the Jews from Babylonian captivity and funded the rebuilding of their temple in Jerusalem. He respected local customs, religions, and governance structures throughout his empire. This wasn't weakness, it was strategic genius. By ruling through tolerance rather than terror, Cyrus created an empire that lasted for centuries because people wanted to be part of it. His model of multicultural empire influenced Alexander the Great, the Roman Empire, and modern concepts of universal human rights. The Persian Empire under Cyrus wasn't just vast, it was visionary. It proved that empires could be built on respect rather than fear, setting a standard that enlightened rulers have aspired to ever since. Number 8. Ashoka the Great of India, 268 to 232 BC. From Persia, we travel east to India to witness one of the most extraordinary transformations in history, not of a kingdom, but of a king's very soul. Ashoka began his reign as a typical ancient conqueror, ruthless, ambitious, unstoppable. His armies swept across the Indian subcontinent, crushing all resistance. Then came the conquest of Kalinga in 261 BC. The battle was horrifically successful. Over 100,000 people died. The rivers ran red with blood. Ashoka stood amidst the carnage he had created, and something inside him shattered. In the aftermath of this victory, Ashoka experienced what we might call the most consequential crisis of conscience in ancient history. He converted to Buddhism and underwent a complete moral transformation. The warrior king became a philosopher king. What happened next changed Asia forever. Ashoka didn't just abandon warfare. He created history's first welfare state. He built hospitals for both humans and animals. He planted trees along roads for shade. He dug wells for travelers. He established one of the first organized systems of veterinary medicine. He promoted religious tolerance across his empire, which stretched across most of the Indian subcontinent. But perhaps most remarkably, Ashoka erected pillars and rock edicts throughout his empire, not to boast of conquests, but to spread messages of dharma, compassion, truthfulness, tolerance, and non-violence. These weren't secret documents. They were public declarations in multiple languages, meant to be read by all his subjects. Ashoka proved that a king could be powerful without being cruel, that an empire could be great without endless conquest. His influence on Buddhism helped spread it throughout Asia. His principles of religious tolerance and ethical governance remain relevant 23 centuries later. He transformed from one of history's most successful conquerors into one of its greatest advocates for peace. Proof that even kings can change, and in changing, change the world. Number 7. Charlemagne, King of the Franks, 768 to 814 AD. Now we leap forward to medieval Europe, a dark age following Rome's collapse. Civilization itself seemed to be flickering out. Into this chaos stepped a warrior king who would literally save Western civilization from oblivion. Charlemagne, Charles the Great, united most of Western Europe for the first time since the Roman Empire. Through 53 military campaigns over 46 years, he forged an empire spanning modern France, Germany, Italy, and beyond. But Charlemagne understood something profound. Empires aren't built just with swords. They're built with knowledge. This warrior king, who learned to read only as an adult, became medieval Europe's greatest champion of learning. He initiated what historians call the Carolingian Renaissance, a deliberate effort to revive education, literature, and arts. He established schools attached to monasteries and cathedrals throughout his empire. He gathered the greatest scholars of the age to his court at Aachen. Charlemagne's scribes developed a new standardized script, Carolingian minuscule, that made books easier to read and copy. This might seem minor, but it preserved classical knowledge that otherwise would have been lost forever. The works of ancient Rome, early Christian theology, and contemporary learning were copied and distributed throughout his empire. On Christmas Day in the year 800, Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne Emperor of the Romans, the first emperor in the West in over 3 centuries. This wasn't just symbolic. It established the Holy Roman Empire and created the political framework for medieval Europe. Charlemagne didn't just rule Europe. He saved it from sliding into complete barbarism. The Renaissance, the universities, the preservation of classical learning. None of this would have been possible without Charlemagne's vision of an educated Christian empire. Number 6. Genghis Khan, Emperor of the Mongols, 1206 to 1227. From the frozen steppes of Mongolia emerged a warrior whose name still evokes both terror and admiration. A man born as Temujin, who would become Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. Let's be clear, Genghis Khan's conquests were brutal beyond measure. His armies killed millions. Cities that resisted were wiped off the map. The Mongol invasions remain among the deadliest conflicts in human history. But here's the paradox that makes Genghis Khan one of history's most important figures. The empire he built became an engine for unprecedented global exchange. Genghis Khan created the largest contiguous land empire in history, stretching from Korea to Hungary, from Siberia to Southeast Asia. At its peak, the Mongol Empire controlled approximately 24 million square kilometers of territory. Within this vast empire, Genghis Khan established revolutionary policies. He promoted based on merit, not birth. A Mongolian herder could become a general if he proved himself capable. He established religious tolerance throughout his empire. Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, and others coexisted peacefully under Mongol rule. Most importantly, he created the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace. Across this empire, traders could travel safely on roads protected by Mongol law. The Silk Road flourished as never before or since. Ideas, technologies, religions, and goods flowed between East and West. Paper and gunpowder traveled west from China. Persian astronomy and mathematics spread east. The compass, printing technology, and countless innovations crossed continents. This exchange of knowledge helped spark the Renaissance in Europe and enriched civilizations across Asia. Genghis Khan's legal code, the Yasa, established diplomatic immunity, a postal system, and religious freedom. His empire created the first true global network of trade and communication. Yes, he was a destroyer, but he was also a unifier who, perhaps unintentionally, created the first version of our interconnected world. The age of global civilization began on the Mongolian steppe. Number 5. King Henry VIII of England, 1509 to 1547. Our next king changed history, not through military conquest, but through a divorce. Yet, the consequences of Henry VIII's personal decisions reshaped religion, politics, and power in ways that still affect us today. Henry VIII began his reign as the model Renaissance king, athletic, cultured, deeply religious, a patron of the arts. The Pope called him defender of the faith for his writings against Protestant reform. Then Henry fell in love with Anne Boleyn and wanted to divorce his first wife, Catherine of Aragon. When Pope Clement VII refused to annul the marriage, Henry did something unprecedented. He broke with the Catholic Church entirely. The English Reformation wasn't primarily about theology. It was about power. By declaring himself supreme head of the Church of England, Henry VIII transferred massive authority from Rome to the English crown. He dissolved the monasteries, seizing their wealth and lands. This wasn't just the largest transfer of property in English history. It created a new class of landowners, loyal to the Protestant crown. The consequences rippled across centuries. England's break with Rome set it on a different path from Catholic Europe. This Protestant identity shaped English culture, politics, and eventually, the British Empire. The conflicts between Catholic and Protestant powers defined European politics for centuries. Religious refugees from England helped settle America. The principle that a nation's ruler could determine its religion contributed to modern concepts of national sovereignty. The very idea of religious nationalism, that religious and political identity are intertwined, owes much to Henry VIII's break with Rome. Henry VIII had 6 wives, executed 2 of them, and left a complicated personal legacy. But his decision to break with Rome changed Western civilization's religious and political landscape forever. Number 4. King Louis XIV of France, 1643 to 1715. L'État, c'est moi. I am the state. With these words, Louis XIV expressed the ultimate vision of absolute monarchy. No king before or since has embodied royal power more completely than the Sun King. Louis XIV ruled France for 72 years, the longest reign of any major European monarch in history. When he became king at age 4, France was torn by civil war. By the time he died, France was the dominant power in Europe, culturally, politically, and militarily. Louis XIV didn't just rule France, he was France. He built the Palace of Versailles, the most magnificent royal residence ever constructed. This wasn't mere vanity. Versailles was a political weapon. By requiring nobles to attend his court, Louis kept potential rivals under his watchful eye, while bankrupting them with the expense of court life. The Sun King created the template for absolute monarchy. Every aspect of his daily life became a ceremonial performance. Even getting dressed in the morning was a formal ritual with strict protocols. This wasn't absurd. It was brilliant political theater that reinforced the divine nature of kingship. Under Louis XIV, France became Europe's cultural capital. French became the language of diplomacy and sophistication. French art, architecture, literature, and fashion set the standard across the continent. The Baroque style that defines this era in European culture flourished under his patronage. Louis XIV professionalized warfare and expanded French borders through a series of wars. His military reforms created the model for modern standing armies. His administration centralized government power in unprecedented ways. But his legacy is complex. His wars drained the treasury. His persecution of Protestants weakened France. His absolute power sowed the seeds for the French Revolution that would destroy the monarchy decades after his death. Nevertheless, Louis XIV's vision of absolute monarchy, cultural supremacy, and centralized state power defined an age. The modern nation-state owes much to his example, for better and worse. Number 3. Frederick the Great of Prussia, 1740 to 1786. In an age of absolute monarchs, one king stood apart, a philosopher on the throne, a military genius who wrote poetry, an enlightened despot who transformed a minor German state into a great power. Frederick the Great inherited Prussia, a relatively small kingdom with limited resources. When he died, he left behind a military powerhouse that would eventually unite Germany and change European history. Frederick was a walking contradiction. He corresponded with Voltaire and other Enlightenment philosophers. He played the flute and composed music. He abolished torture and promoted religious tolerance. Yet, he was also one of history's greatest military commanders, fighting wars throughout his reign. His military innovations revolutionized warfare. He perfected oblique order tactics, developed rapid infantry movement, and created the first modern general staff system. His victories against much larger forces in the 7 Years' War, especially at Rossbach and Leuthen, remain textbook examples of military genius. But Frederick's true legacy lies in how he transformed the nature of kingship. He called himself the first servant of the state, a radical departure from divine right monarchy. He saw the king's role as serving the nation, not the other way around. Frederick modernized Prussia's administration, promoted education, encouraged industry and agriculture, and established an efficient bureaucracy based on merit. He created a state where legal reform and religious tolerance coexisted with military discipline and absolute authority. This model of enlightened absolutism, using absolute power to modernize and rationalize the state, influenced rulers across Europe. More importantly, Frederick proved that a small state with determination, organization, and leadership could stand against empires. Prussia's eventual unification of Germany under Bismarck followed Frederick's blueprint: military strength combined with efficient administration. The Germany that emerged in 1871 was Frederick's ultimate legacy, though he never could have imagined the consequences of the powerful Germany he helped create. Number 2. Peter the Great of Russia, 1682 to 1725. Imagine a nation locked in medieval isolation while the rest of Europe surges into modernity. Now imagine a king so determined to transform his backward empire that he literally dragged it, screaming and resisting, into the modern age. That was Peter the Great. When Peter became Tsar, Russia was isolated, technologically backward, and largely irrelevant to European politics. It had no navy, minimal industry, and a nobility resistant to any change. Peter traveled incognito through Western Europe, working in shipyards, studying fortifications, and learning about Western technology and governance. He returned determined to westernize Russia by force if necessary. And force was necessary. Peter ordered nobles to shave their beards, a shocking violation of orthodox tradition. He forced them to adopt Western clothing. He created Russia's first navy from nothing. He built a new capital, St. Petersburg, on swampland at enormous human cost, creating a window to the West. He reformed the military using Western tactics and equipment. He modernized the administration, creating a table of ranks that promoted based on merit rather than birth. He promoted education, science, and industry. He forcibly secularized parts of Russian society. The human cost was staggering. Tens of thousands died building St. Petersburg. Peter could be brutally cruel. He even had his own son tortured and imprisoned, where he died. But the results were undeniable. By Peter's death, Russia had defeated Sweden, then a major power, and become a Baltic power. Russia had entered European politics as a major player. Russian industry and trade had expanded dramatically. Russia had been transformed from a medieval backwater into a modern empire. Peter the Great's legacy is controversial. He modernized Russia, but through autocratic force that established patterns of authoritarian modernization that continue today. He opened Russia to the West, but through methods that traumatized Russian society. Nevertheless, without Peter the Great, there would be no Russian Empire, no Soviet Union, and the entire history of Europe and the world would be unrecognizably different. He didn't just change Russia, he forced Russia to change the world. Number 1. Alexander the Great, 336 to 323 BC. And now, we arrive at our number 1 choice. The king whose 13-year reign changed world history more profoundly than perhaps any other ruler before or since. Alexander III of Macedon became king at 20 after his father's assassination. He died at 33, having conquered most of the known world. In between, he created an empire, spread Greek civilization across 3 continents, and changed the course of human history forever. Alexander's conquests were staggering in speed and scope. He defeated the Persian Empire, the superpower of the ancient world, in just 3 major battles. He conquered Egypt, where he was declared pharaoh, and founded Alexandria. He marched his army through Central Asia to the borders of India, winning every battle he fought. At its peak, Alexander's empire stretched from Greece to India, encompassing approximately 2 million square miles. No European commander would conquer so much territory again until the age of colonialism 2,000 years later. But Alexander's true genius lay not in conquest, but in vision. He didn't just conquer, he integrated. He married a Persian princess and encouraged his officers to do the same. He adopted Persian administrative systems. He founded over 20 cities, most named Alexandria, that became centers of Greek culture throughout Asia. This fusion of Greek and Eastern cultures created the Hellenistic Age. Greek became the common language from Egypt to Afghanistan. Greek philosophy, art, science, and literature spread throughout the known world. The Library of Alexandria became the greatest repository of knowledge in the ancient world. The consequences were immeasurable. Buddhism spread into Central and East Asia, was influenced by Greek artistic traditions Alexander brought east. The scientific revolution of Hellenistic scholars, built on the cosmopolitan culture Alexander created. The Roman Empire adopted and spread Greek culture that Alexander had made universal. Even the rise of Christianity was shaped by Alexander. The New Testament was written in Greek, the common language of the Eastern Mediterranean, thanks to Alexander. Christian theology developed in the Hellenistic intellectual tradition Alexander's conquests had established. Alexander proved that one individual with vision, courage, and determination could reshape the world. He created the first truly cosmopolitan civilization where different cultures could interact and influence each other. In just 13 years, he laid the foundations for Western civilization as we know it. He died at 33 in Babylon, possibly of typhoid fever or poisoning. His empire immediately fragmented, but the world Alexander created, cosmopolitan, interconnected, culturally diverse, yet united by common language and ideas, that world endured. Alexander the Great didn't just conquer the world, he reimagined what the world could be. Conclusion. From the Code of Hammurabi to Alexander's world empire, from Charlemagne's preservation of knowledge to Peter the Great's forceful modernization, these 10 kings prove that individual leadership can alter the course of history. Some ruled through tolerance and mercy, others through force and determination. Some were enlightened philosophers, others were ruthless warriors, but all shared one quality: the vision to see beyond their own time and the will to transform their vision into reality. These weren't just kings. They were revolutionaries wearing crowns, philosophers commanding armies, builders of civilizations that outlasted their empires. Their legacies, both brilliant and brutal, shape our world today. Our laws, our religions, our concepts of governance, our very civilization bears their fingerprints. History isn't made by inevitable forces. It's made by individuals who refuse to accept the world as it is and dare to create the world as it should be. These were the 10 kings who changed world history. This has been Warpath Histories. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Let us know in the comments, which king do you think had the greatest impact on history? And which kings do you think we should have included? Until next time, keep exploring the paths of history